of the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. We will have Sarah to provide our roll call.
Jerry Buckner.
Here.
Dennis Bland.
Present.
Sean Conant.
Here.
John Costas. John Duarte de Suarez. Judge Fisher.
Here.
Lisa Hirschman. Here. Al Hubbard.
Here.
Chris LeBeau. Chris Murphy. Dan Peterson. John Cobb. And Karen Meyer. Here.
And then do we have anyone on who is joining us via conference call?
Chris was going to try. I don't know.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to recognize at this time Chancellor Shimei Miseki, who is the Chancellor at IU Kokomo. You have been such a wonderful hostess, and everyone here have been so gracious to us that we appreciate that hospitality. If you have remarks, please.
Well, good afternoon. Just some brief remarks since we've spent so much time together. Would like to welcome everybody who's come to campus and hope that you've got an opportunity to kind of walk around and enjoy the campus and see some of the sites. We're obviously very proud of our regional campus. And I hope our presentations both yesterday and today helped you understand the dual role that we play as a regional campus in the state of Indiana. Yesterday you heard from my Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs, Mark Canada, on all the student success initiatives that we have implemented in order to try to help our students not only to get into college, but obviously to get out of college, to complete college. And so we're very grateful for some of the funding that we received from the Commission so that we can obviously implement a summer bridge program for 21st Century Scholars and also the Inside Track coaching program for 21st Century Scholars. So we're very appreciative, and we'll continue with those student success initiatives and hope that we can start moving those needles as fast as we possibly can. And then second of all, today you heard about our regional campus mission as far as what we do to partner with our region, partnering with business, education, nonprofits, and that we have a lot of activity going on in that particular regard. It's a very important part of our mission. We really do value being a regional partner with everyone involved. So I hope you've learned a little bit more about what it's like to live on a regional campus and live in Kokomo, Indiana. We've given you a little bit of a tour of the community. So thank you again for hosting it here and for coming and listening and learning a little bit more about us. So thank you and welcome everyone to campus.
Again, thank you to you and all your staff. For the chair's report, I would like to make known to all here that the Commission has scheduled its annual H. Kent Weldon Conference for Higher Education. That's set for Thursday, April the 14th, 2016. That's the second Thursday of the month, and it will be held at the Indianapolis Marriott North. We will have more information about the Weldon Conference in a future meeting, but please, if you could mark your calendar, again, that's Thursday, April the 14th. Also, please be reminded that next Wednesday, September the 16th, the Commission is hosting a competency-based education summit. And then later this fall, we're going to have a student advocate conference. Jason Pierce is going to talk more about that during the public square. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our Commissioner for the Commissioner's report.
I don't usually leave my seat for this, but I'm doing so today for a very special reason. Last night we had the opportunity to be together for a wonderful dinner, and thanks to the Chancellor, the staff here, we've had a great day and a half learning more about Kokomo and IU Kokomo. It's been a great experience for us. But last night we celebrated a very special person and a very special occasion for the Commission, and we'd like to continue, and in the spirit that our Chairman indicated this morning at our working session, this is the day of Ken Sauer. And because, for those of you who weren't with us last night, September marks the 30th anniversary of Ken being a member of the Commission for Higher Education. So we've asked a few people to join us if they'd like to join us at the table. Over here, Neelan and Sarah and Terry, I think they put a seat for you there as well. So you have your trustee staff and your I guess I'm starting to say long-term but we toasted his leadership last night and had an opportunity to talk a little bit about how special Ken has been to the Commission, to the state of Indiana, and really to the nation as a thought leader in higher education and a committed and passionate person about education in the state. So we want to continue the celebration today a little bit more. While Governor Pence was not able to be with us today, he is allowing me to be his surrogate for this special ceremony and to present to you a Sagamore of the Wabash. Let me use this opportunity to just tell you a little bit more about Ken that you may not be aware of, although some of you may. I've mentioned that Ken has been with the Commission for Higher Education for 30 years. He has spent his life in public service. He actually met Neelan and started off early in life as a member of the Peace Corps. And then he actually served at the Illinois Board of Higher Education. He served for NCHEMS, which is the National Center for Education Management Systems, Higher Education Management Systems. So he came to us well prepared for the work that he's been doing for so long. There is really nothing you can bring up about academic affairs that Ken isn't leading in the nation. I kiddingly say to Sarah sometimes, Sarah Appel, who's here with us, along with Terry Lambert, who are his trusted colleagues in this work, that I'm not sure where Ken is sometimes, but I know he's doing important work wherever he is. And I can tell you that it reflects very well on Indiana because he is considered a leader. So we just, how many people get an opportunity to spend 3 decades doing work that they care so much about and would do it with such professionalism and grace? Lisa asked me, have you ever seen him lose his temper? Neil and I haven't, maybe you have, but I have not. I won't put you on the spot. Even when he might be frustrated with some of us, he's gracious and he uses that as a teaching moment for all of us. For that we can be very, very grateful. So the Sagamore of the Wabash, as many of you know, is the state's high award that we give to only a very few people who've actually distinguished themselves in their service. As it says several things here, but among it says that whereas Dr. Ken Sauer has distinguished himself by his humanity in living, his loyalty in friendship, his wisdom in counsel, and his inspiration in leadership. And for those reasons, recognizing his greatness and desiring to avail myself of his counsel, I do hereby appoint him a chieftain upon my staff with the rank and title of Sagamore of the Wabash.
Ken is celebrating, and we're all celebrating his 30th anniversary. I have to note that I started working with Ken 29 years ago. He was 1 year ahead of me, and I became Chancellor of IUPUI in 1986, 1 year after he became a member of the Commission for Higher Education staff. And he started teaching me things that I didn't know in 1986. And it's continued right through until 2015. It's been a wonderful experience for me to work with Ken. He has, as Teresa said, a national perspective and experience that I think has been helpful to the state of Indiana. I think he's one of the most important ingredients in the success of higher education in Indiana. And I think right now we should be very proud of our Commission for Higher Education, Teresa and people on the commission I'm privileged to work with. I think after all the years that the two of us have been around, could observe together that this is one of the best state governing bodies or facilitative bodies in the country right now. And a lot of the credit for that goes to Ken Sauer. Ken, congratulations.
Well, gee, I'm kind of overwhelmed and very touched by all of this and very much appreciate this great honor and appreciate all the kind words that were said today and last evening as well. The 30 years have gone by very quickly, but it's been a great job for me. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and the reason why I think I have hung around for 30 years is that this is work for a great boss, a commissioner who is, I think, the best in the country. I'm a little biased, but anyway, she's a wonderful boss. You all are great commissioners to work with. My colleagues on staff have been great to work with. And also all of the great friendships that have developed with my colleagues at the institution. So all of that really has allowed me, I think, to make a modest contribution to higher education in Indiana. And I should also point out that Neelan and I have been married this month 45 years. And and she is very much, to the extent I have made a modest contribution here, she deserves to share in that contribution as well, because she's been my support, my partner for 4.5 decades, and it just makes my work here possible. So thank you, Neil. And thank you all. I really appreciate this very much.
So again, Ken, congratulations. But after hearing 45 years of marriage, maybe we need to take that from you. Sincerely, though, when you look at the origin of the Sagamore, I think it derived from the history of the individuals in Indiana getting together and saying we have hot issues before us. We have to identify those individuals and who are those rare individuals amongst the tribes who can actually give them sage counsel and advice as to how we move forward in Sagamore. So I just can't think of a person who's more fitted. I just think we're amongst greatness. Since higher education versus, say, basketball, that get the kind of recognition in the higher education realm. We're amongst greatness. And the grace with you and the humility with which you do it, all the more than honor. So congratulations. So now we have our minutes for our August 13th commission meeting. I have a motion to approve. A motion, a second, or a comment?
And then a comment. Sorry,
Please comment.
I was listed as both here and not here in the minutes, and I'll just let someone choose whichever one. I was not here.
Make that correction. So we have a motion, second. All in favor of approving as amended, so indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved.
By the way, I was also played a double role. It's listed both here and not here. I was not. I was partially on the phone because I wanted to vote, but it didn't work out. But I did make my position known, and I think y'all shared that. Yeah, so I don't know how that's supposed to be. And
Thank you.
that counts as a hearing. But then I was present and not absent.
We'll make all the adjustments. Our recent discussions about our new strategic plan have leaned toward creating a college-going culture. In light of these conversations, the staff created a public square for us today that features two topics that speak to the overarching goal of advancing the college completion culture. So we will start with the progress report on the 21st Century Scholars Program. First, I would like to introduce our panel of experts here to discuss our second topic, Indiana's College and Career Success Mentoring Initiative. So I would like to welcome Ms. Tracy Butler, who's a consultant for the Indiana Institute. Tracy, welcome. Molly Chamberlain, I'm biased in that person. Hello, Molly. Welcome back. She's the Director of Program Evaluation at the Indiana Youth Institute. Mr. Timothy Clark, who's Outreach Coordinator for the Central Region for the Commission. Kelly Nelson, Consultant for the Commission. And then Ms. Tammy Pearson, Director of Project Leadership. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Pierce.
Thank you, Chairman Blaine, for that great introduction. And start by thanking Dr. Sauer for graciously sharing a portion of his special day with the relative newcomer that is the 21st Century Scholars Program. It's only been around the block for 25 years, but nevertheless, we thought this would be a good time to sort of take a moment, reflect on the program, talk a bit about what's worked, what challenges remain, and sort of show what we think the outlook is moving forward for what we hope will be well beyond the next 25 years. This first slide will show you sort of lays out, as we see it, some of the major milestones of the program. You'll see that the 21st Century Scholars Program started in 1990, was really the first of its kind anywhere in the country. Today there are at least two programs based upon in other states, but other states and other local cities have modeled various programs and initiatives on the 21st Century Scholars Program. In many ways, the Scholars Program was really a national leader in addressing an issue that many had talked about, but none had done anything about, to the extent that Indiana had, sort of making a really bold proclamation that a family's income should not be the difference in whether it was possible for that student to go to college. That student made a commitment to do what was asked of him or her, then Indiana would make a commitment to that individual and make it possible for them to attend up to 4 years of college. You'll see that that very second milestone was about 5 years later, the first 21st Century Scholar enrolled in college. We have to speculate a bit about exactly what year the first scholar graduated from college, because our completion data record is a little fuzzy going back pre-2001, but we can assume that those students started matriculating in the late 1990s. And although this chart would make it seem as if nothing happened over the intervening 20 years, I think it is fair to say that, and some of our panelists might be able to speak to this as those who sort of lived this program on the front lines, but there's been more energy and activity around the 21st Century Scholars Program in the last, say 24 to 36 months than maybe there had in some ways for the previous 25 years. I think as a state, and particularly as a commission, we decided that let's make a great program even better, and one way to do that is to place much more concerted effort and energy around ensuring that we're not just sending students to college, but they're graduating. And you'll see sort of a series of initiatives that have rolled out starting roughly around the time that the Commission assumed responsibility for the 21st Century Scholars Program. Everything from establishing really clear college-ready expectations. And you'll see that first happened with students, that was in 2011, sort of putting our money where our mouth is in terms of providing more outreach support to 21st Century Scholars, not just going to college, but on the college campuses. That ScholarCorps program is now currently at 17 campuses, including this one, where we're coordinating services in partnership with our college and universities. We've had a lot of reports about our sort of nationally recognized financial aid reforms, which included credit completion requirements for scholars as well as all state financial aid recipients. Also on this campus, there's maybe in many ways there's maybe not a better place to give this presentation today, because if there's a reform or an effort taking place in Indiana right now on the post-secondary side in support of 21st Century Scholars, it would appear that this campus is front and center and part of that effort, one of which includes being one of the campuses starting this year that's receiving our college success coaches with the assistance of that firm Inside Track. I have a little bit more information to share with that later. The legislature empowered us to set a higher expectations for scholars with a higher GPA of 2.5 from the historical 2.0, all based upon a lot of data and recognition that if we didn't want just to send students to college, but want to graduate them, we need to set a higher bar. And then we'll see that we're sort of in a, I think internally we talk about this a lot, in some ways we're sort of in a frustrating time because we have so many efforts in the pipeline right now, and we haven't had the benefit of seeing them come all to fruition. And just to sort of put that in perspective, the first class of students that will be impacted by many of the legislative and administrative reforms won't be until that graduating class of 2017. So that's the first class that's going to be held to those new Scholar Success Program requirements. We just graduated our first class to be held to the new GPA. So we're seeing some encouraging trends, but we hope that's just sort of the start of a much greater momentum for positive change. Just a few numbers to throw at you. More than 70,000 students, as best we can tell, have used the 21st Century Scholarship. This is where we have to use a little bit of math, and when I have a tendency to start speculating, my colleague, Dr. Townsley, will correct me with accurate data. But as we can see, our best guess, looking at sort of the track record over the past 25 years, we think there's around 30,000 students that have graduated from that program. We'd be the first to say that we'd like that number to be a lot higher than it is, but nevertheless, there's tens of thousands of individuals in the state that very likely might not have education beyond high school if it weren't for this program. And the last bullet sort of speaks to the fact that this program has really wildly exceeded its expectations in terms of the popularity of the program. There's almost not a place we can go in the state, and I've traveled with the commissioner many places as we visit our College Success Coalition and others, and everywhere we go, people talk about the 21st Century Scholars Program, or they are 21st Century Scholars, or they know 21st Century Scholars, and by many metrics, the program is wildly exceeded its sort of its start. And here are the big takeaways that we often remind ourselves as we're looking at ways to make the program better. And you have this data at your places or over there that sort of puts this in more concrete detail for you. But this is a program that the students in it not only go to college at higher rates than their low-income peers, but they go to college at higher rates than the general population as a whole, which is pretty remarkable because 25 years ago, it's not that long ago, that many students thought that college was out of reach for them. And I think there were some assumptions made about you could draw a pretty strong correlation between the likelihood to go to college and your parents' income level. And I think the Scholars Program is one avenue that's largely debunked that notion. Number 2 and 3, some would say the Scholars Program is already making good on its promise in this regard too, in terms of more of our scholars are going to college, more of them are college ready than their low-income peers, and they're also graduating at higher rates than their low-income peers. But that's the unfortunate caveat. We can't say they're more college ready than all students and they complete college at higher rates than all students. We haven't crested that particular area quite yet, but that's the goal. So let's take just a moment to look a little bit closer at our scholar population. This chart shows you our enrollment of our scholars relative to the population of Indiana's 8th graders as a whole. So if the program is doing what it should, we should see rough parity between enrolling roughly the same amount of students. You'll see, and this is sort of indicative of some larger challenges we're seeing, that the program actually over-enrolls relative to the percentage of the population among African American students. They're 12% of our 8th grade population, but we're enrolling nearly double that at 21%. In contrast, we're under-enrolling for our Hispanic students, and we've had a number of meetings where we looked at the achievement gap, and what that data shows is bear out in this data as well, and that we're doing a far better job helping African American students access college, but there's some very significant completion challenges for that demographic. Whereas Hispanic students, we still have a pretty significant challenge in just getting them to access college. So this shows where the 21st Century College Program could be a bit more impactful. Still, it's roughly par, but we think we could do a little better. And then you can see for the white population as well, under enrolling relative to the population whole, but still by far reflective of our demographics of the state. The vast majority of 21st century scholars are white students. But these are the more compelling data in terms of showing the challenges that our scholars come to us with. 1.4 times more likely to be the first in their family to go to college. We had a really compelling presentation yesterday by the Vice Chancellor. He talked about a lot of these first generation and non-cognitive challenges that first generation students come with, so we know that's something that we have to address. Certainly, not having the full support of the family unit is an issue as well. We see they're 2.5 times more likely to be raised by a single parent. And of course, this is a need-based program. These are students who come to us from poverty, and this shows that this is all based on our FAFSA filing data that the income level of scholar families is 75% lower. Not just the population as a whole, but those who apply for financial aid. And most people in the state understand that we have largely a need-based financial aid system, so it certainly tilts in that direction. They've enrolled the program. Let's see what this looks like. And there's a lot going on this slide, but this sort of shows you, even though we've done an incredible job as a state in getting students in this program and on the path to college, and we've seen sort of this steadily increasing trajectory in terms of students applying and enrolling in the program. We see sort of diminishing returns even before we get to college. We're losing significant numbers of students from the time that they enroll to what's called a firm. The risk of getting the weeds a little bit, the way the program has worked historically is you signed up in middle school. There's a chance that you may never have heard from anyone again until the end of high school when you're asked to complete what's called the affirmation process, which basically is certifying that you've met the obligations of the program and you're prepared to take the next step. And we see a very significant drop-off from that, and part of the reason we think that is because this is an area that the state is trying to do more and be more proactive about staying in contact with those students and making sure they're on track and not just waiting to see what happens in high school. The other issue, and this maybe is more my personal bent with the issue, is the affirmation process as it worked isn't necessarily serving the purpose it was meant to serve. It sounds good in concept in that it's sort of certifying at the end of high school that you've met all of your obligations, you have your ticket, you're ready to go to college. But as we dug a little deeper, we come to find that in many communities, that's not the way the process works. Students get asked to basically fill out a form as early as the beginning of high school to certify things that they might actually not be able to certify. They can't certify that they filed a FAFSA, they can't certify that they met their GPA, they can't certify necessarily that they applied to college, let alone be accepted to college. So it's sort of, as it exists in many communities across the state currently, it's serving more as just another arbitrary piece of paper that the student has to fill out that may or may not make the difference between whether or not they can go to college. Not to say that those checks aren't important, but we feel that there's an opportunity to make that a little bit more meaningful process. And we see, again, continuing with the diminishing returns that we lose more students as they file the FAFSA. And this speaks to the issue of summer melt, that we have far too many students, and this is not just true for scholars, but particularly true for scholars who have met all their obligations and have up to a 4-year scholarship waiting for them, and for whatever reason, they never activate that scholarship. They finish high school in the spring and they're never heard from again, or maybe they have plans to come back a year later, but we know that doesn't happen nearly as often as we like. And so, again, this speaks to using this data to inform our decision making, and are there opportunities to stay better connected with those students and keep them on track and not sort of wait for, starting with roughly 20-some thousand students and finishing with, only 7,000 or fewer. I should say that this 2014 class was one of our largest classes. Typically, our scholar classes are in the 10 to 15,000 student range, but nevertheless, and Stacy can correct me if I'm wrong in this, but the general proportions in terms of drop-off is fairly consistent across the years.
Can you, sorry to interrupt?
Yeah, no.
Remind us what you have to do to qualify.
Let's change it.
And then what percentage of those who could qualify actually apply?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know that off the top of my head. I can tell you what they have to do to qualify. Historically, it was will be a free and reduced lunch, enrolled in Indiana high school, basically stay out of trouble, no drugs, alcohol, or crime, and then what was a 2.0 GPA. Now those things are the same, except for it's a 2.5 GPA, and starting with that class of 2017, they have to also complete those annual scholarship assessment
Poverty.
activities.
They have to be free and reduced.
Free and reduced
That's
lunch,
the,
that's
that's the poverty quality.
Right.
And how large is tuition assistance?
It's the equivalent of 4 years at our four-year public colleges.
It's full.
It covers tuition and mandatory fees. It doesn't cover room and board, except at some of our institutions do wraparound support. So if a scholar goes to IU Bloomington, they get what's called the Covenant, and they get room and board as well as tuition and fees. Purdue has a similar program called the Purdue Promise that does that. Most all of our colleges offer some sort of supplementary support, but the way it works is up to the equivalent of 4 years public tuition or applying that amount to a private college. They can take it to either public or private. But a few slides later, I'll show you a little bit more about where the majority of our scholars are attending. I want to say that our overall enrollment rate is like in the 30s or 40s, I think, percentage-wise. So it's not as high as one might expect, and again, this is one of those areas where we want to be a little bit smarter about how we target our outreach. I mean, there are some communities that have made enrolling scholars like their top priority, and they enroll 100% of our scholars. Then we look at the data in other counties, and they've got really high poverty rates, and very few of their eligible students are enrolling in the program. And there's been debates at various points about whether we should just automatically enroll students who meet the income level. I think the prevailing wisdom up to this point is that a student or a family should have to make a commitment and sort of make a conscious decision to opt into this. But nevertheless, I think it shows that there's some opportunity to make sure that at least the awareness of the opportunity is more well known across the state. Stacy, you want to add something?
I would just add that, for the last 2 years worth of data, we know that the number of students who actually applied to the program was about 24,000, more or less. So we lost a couple of thousand as they moved into the enrolled status.
And this is going back a little ways, but one of the commission prior to the legislation went through was asked to study all the state financial aid programs, including the 21st Century Scholars. And one of the things that we identified as an opportunity was a better job to tighten up on the front end as well, because it come to find out we had some students who had signed up for the program that were never actually eligible financially. So that was one area we wanted to address. But it's sort of that we need to address this from both sides. We have some students who've gotten in the program historically that maybe shouldn't have, and so now there's some additional checks in place for that. But certainly there are a fair number of students around the state that were never given the opportunity to avail themselves of this program, and we'd like to pay some attention to that as well. Other questions before I move on? I'll just keep going. This shows a little bit more about that achievement gap, and you see that where it's particularly strong in terms of this is the affirmation rates, that's meeting your obligation to access the scholarship at the end of high school. You'll see that our African American students, our Hispanic students are particularly below average, and this sort of bears out from the earlier slide that African American students in particular have some struggles in that regard. But interestingly, we see, at least on the access end, some of these gaps disappear in terms of FAFSA filing and scholarship use. So there's some interesting things going on in the data there. Stacy, I don't want to put you on the spot. Is there anything you wanted to add to that or no?
Not necessarily. I mean, it is interesting to track the data through the different program mileposts, from enrollment to affirmation to filing the FAFSA to scholarship use. And I think breaking it out by race ethnicity did highlight some opportunities that we can use to help improve.
So this, I don't know if it speaks directly to Al's question, but it was kind of a nice lead-in. So of our 21st Century Scholars that graduate, 76% of those go to college. And if you see on the data in front of you, that's nearly double the college access rate of our non-scholar low-income students, and it's actually above all students as a whole. So 76% of scholars versus 65% for the Indiana student population as a whole. But looking beyond that, the vast majority of 21st Century Scholars choose to attend a public Indiana college. 11% go to a private college, and 3% are going to out-of-state colleges, which the scholarship does not pay for. We assume that is because they got into a really great school and not just because they made an unfortunate decision. This shows, again, sort of how things have changed over time, and it has always been the case, and continues to be the case, that the majority of scholars are using their scholarships at a four-year college, but we are seeing, and we have representatives from Ivy Tech in the room, we've seen some momentum in the other direction on that, in that we've seen an increasing number of scholars who are now attending two-year colleges. You see that most of that change has happened just in the last 5 or 6 years since 2009. Yes, sir.
If I'm a scholar, can I attend a two-year college first and then transfer to a four-year?
Yes, you can.
So you can-
Yes, absolutely. Teresa, do you want to say something? Okay. These are the top 10 colleges by scholar enrollment. Ivy Tech is number one. Now, to be fair, that's 23 campuses of the Ivy Tech system compared to, in most cases, a single campus. And so we're at lunch today. Indiana State is the largest single enrolling campus in Indiana, and I think that's indicative of a lot of their efforts. They've really made the sort of low-income first-generation student one of the real focal points, and that's bared out in the numbers in terms of the percentage of scholars that are choosing Indiana State as a first choice. But you can see, the leaders in the top 5, roughly around 10%, are Ivy Tech, ISU, IUPUI, IU Bloomington, and Ball State, followed shortly by Ivy Tech, and so forth. But we can see here that all the top 10 schools are all public schools. I think the only private college campus we have that has more than 121st century scholars in it, which is the University of Indianapolis, which makes sense given the population density in Marion County. But how do they perform? It's great that we're sending them, it's great that we know who they are, but how are they doing? And I think you had this in front of you. I'm not going to read all these numbers to you, but this is something we started doing, I believe, in 2012, the first time we do an annual 21st Century Scholar Scorecard. And I know, I'll maybe put on the spot later, Tammy Pearson from Project Leadership, who really does this work, lives and breathes this work every day on the front lines, has talked about how impactful it's been to have these kinds of numbers at their fingertips in the works they're doing with communities and schools. And it tells a pretty compelling story, and depending on your bent, whether you're more of an optimist or a pessimist, you can sort of pull the story you want out of these numbers. Certainly across the board, we can say we want the numbers to be higher, and that scholars and students in general should be graduating from college at greater rates. But in some regards, the program has already met its obligation in terms of overcoming poverty as the main limiting factor to college access and success. We can see across pretty much every metric that scholars outperform their low-income peers, not just in accessing college, but even performance, retention, and particularly in graduation. A 6% differential, or 6-point differential in on-time completion, and an 11-point differential in extended time completion. Neither of those numbers are where we want them to be, but those are significant disparities between scholars and the non-scholar low-income population. Although, we're not satisfied with just comparing scholars to like-income peers. We think that given the right support, given the right incentives, given the right expectations, they can perform as well as any students in the state of Indiana. We've largely already proved that on the access side. Now the challenge is to do a better job on the completion side as well. I'm certainly not going to run through the numbers on the next slide, other than say they're on the other side of your handout, but just as we think it's important to provide good data at sort of a state level context, find that our work with our colleges, particularly some of our direct outreach work, looking at these numbers can really focus the conversation around where the areas for focus and improvement need to be. And we provide this context and see sort of how our scholars are stacking up statewide, but you can also see some of the distinctions between mission and population of our different campuses based upon the academic preparation level of our scholars, and also some of the success outcomes we're seeing on the other side. And certainly we can go back to any of these things. So this is showing sort of the completion view relative to scholars compared to all low-income students measured primarily for being Pell eligible, and they also provide a benchmark for all students as well. This is sort of our completion report view, where we take sort of the long view of how completion is shaking out, even if you give a much longer time horizon and you look at giving them sort of the greatest opportunity to finish at a different institution with a different degree type. But in any case, we see that scholars, just like the earlier slides, on the whole are outperforming their low-income peers. But we're, in some cases, in fact most cases, we're not seeing that same success in comparison to the general population. But on the whole, they're performing at or above their low-income peers. But again, we feel like we can do better in this moving forward.
What do you have to do to qualify for a Pell?
It's again based upon poverty level, like everything else. So,
And can you be both a scholar and a fellow?
But for purposes of comparison, we've kept the Pell recipient Colin simply Pell non-scholar.
Right. This is just looking at all Indiana students and sort of looking at the trend line. We see that, and this is the encouraging news that the commissioner mentioned earlier, we're seeing improvement, modest though it may be, in our completion rates generally and specific to our 21st century scholars. Again, it's modest, but we're seeing improvement both at the not only at the four-year college level, but the two-year college as well. So those are both encouraging signs. But more recently, and this is where I talk about that sort of tension we have, where we put, and Dr. Chamberlain can talk about, doing controlled studies, and it'd be really nice if we could sort of parse out exactly which strategy or approach we put in place is having the biggest return. But we don't feel like we have the luxury of time or patience to do that kind of controlled study. And so we're pretty much throwing everything we can think of at this population, this program, and hoping that the collective impact is one that really moves us in a much more positive direction. And so briefly, this sort of summarizes some of the things I've already said, and then shows some of the stuff we've done, and then leave you with a little, what we hope is sort of some signs of some future momentum to come. So just quickly, totally refocusing the program on student success. The commissioner often says this, I think she said this recently last night, but this program was always intended to be a preparation program first and a scholarship program second. It's fair to say that's not always the way it was interpreted across the state, and we feel like one of the reasons that is the state could do more to make it clear about what it means to be a 21st century scholar, and that it is really, at the end of the day, an earned benefit rather than an entitlement program. So just a brief summary of what we've done in that regard: raising the minimum GPA, making the standard college and career diploma the standard diploma for 21st century scholars, establishing these very explicit college readiness expectations, carrying that through on the college side with the credit completion requirements, adding the flexibility. This is not just for scholars, but it certainly impacts scholars to use their state aid during the summer. We've done a number of things, many of which are in place on this campus, to supplement and complement what's already going on with our post-secondary partners, most exemplified by that Scholar Corps program and these inside track coaches that we deploy across the state. I can't resist putting this up here anytime I talk about the 21st Century Scholars Program, in terms of really going back to an earlier conversation we had today about providing students a roadmap. These set of expectations weren't developed in a vacuum. They weren't developed by a couple of bureaucrats in Indianapolis. They were developed by bureaucrats in Indianapolis, as well as stakeholders from across the state, to look at what would be a fair, reasonable expectation for students that would keep them on track for college success. And I think most of the individuals that are on our panel today were part of those conversations, and how we decided that it shouldn't just be a cumulative list of things that you have to do in no particular order, but should be sort of a thoughtful, logical progression, and there should be annual expectations. And this is sort of still in proof of concept phase, and that the first class of students to be held to these expectations are just in 11th grade this year. So soon we'll have some even better data to see how these types of expectations, what kind of effect they're having on the students, and what kind of response we're seeing. But just thought I'd give you that too as context. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that our goal is not for schools to segregate out their low-income students and do these things with just them. We're hopeful that with the right support and encouragement, and what we're going to talk about as a panel is part of that, schools and communities will develop this kind of approach for all their students, and all students would benefit. If you happen to be a 21st Century Scholar, you're also going to get a really nice scholarship as well. We've really tried to step up in providing much more direct, on-demand, and proactive outreach to our scholars. When we're going to set these expectations, we have to have a way for every student to be able to access these resources. We also have to have a way for every student to be able to verify that they've completed these expectations. And that's why we have this 21st Century Scholars website and our Scholar Track system that goes along with that. And we had a little preview of some of the related work that commission staff are undergoing right now in terms of rebuilding our entire financial aid back-end database system. As those systems come online, we see an opportunity to even better and more closely integrate that work with this work so that it really is more of a seamless experience for students and it's much more user-friendly. We can envision a time where, again, these systems would be just as beneficial for non-scholars as they are for students who are legitimately enrolled in the program. Again, we provide really what we hope is very clear, accessible information every single year in the program. We're hitting them with electronically, via print, via direct mail, hopefully via school and community partners to make sure that every step of the way they know what's expected of them and they can make good on that promise of being a scholar. We're starting to see some results from this work. Now, again, it's difficult to correlate with any one thing, but we're seeing, we can show that the response students are having to some of our recent policy changes would suggest that they were the right policy changes. When I remember being on local radio and having just outraged parents about this idea that raising the GPA from 2.0 to 2.5, what that was going to do to students. You can't do this to these students. And we were pretty firm, and to credit, a lot of community leaders were firm as well, saying that we're really not doing students any favors by keeping that bar at 2.0. If the goal is just graduate them from high school and send them to college, great, leave it at 2.0. But if you actually want them to graduate from college, we need to raise that. And we see that with the higher expectation, the GPA is trending in a positive direction. So in 2005, and again, you have to take this data with a bit of a grain of salt in terms of the reporting, but we had just over half of students that were at or above that 2.5 threshold. And although the class of 2015 was the first class to be held to that new 2.5 GPA, we see that even before that, we were above 60%, as early as 2012, which is roughly a year within those changes were first announced. So we see that students are responding to the change. And just as we're seeing more students being above that 2.5, we're also seeing a marked decrease in the students being below that. So we feel pretty good that if we can use this as a proxy for academic preparation, that we're starting to see some positive signs in that regard. Brief recap of something you've seen before. We saw the early signs of success from our credit completion reforms, and again, we saw improvement across our entire financial aid population, but the response was particularly strong and significant for 21st Century Scholars. We saw a 55% one-year improvement in course taking, being above 30 credit hours per year among scholars, which is pretty impressive. You see 19% for abandon, which is also really impressive. It only seems less impressive in comparison to 21st Century Scholars, and we see similar improvement in terms of completing 30 credits or more. Now, I know my colleague, Sarah Hanson, will be first to point out that this is just an early snapshot, and we'll be watching this closely. But we're encouraged that we had a relatively short timeline as a state, not just the commission, but our colleges and community partners, to let students even know about these new requirements, and we saw a pretty positive response. And so our hope is, as it becomes more institutionalized and there are more supports in place, that hopefully those numbers will go up even higher. And then the last bit of data I'll share with you is specific. This is sort of hot off the presses and somewhat preliminary, so please view it as such. But in 2014, we received a $2.5 million grant from USA funds to provide these coaches, these Inside Track coaches, to a number of our campuses, the entire Ivy Tech system, Indiana State, IUPUI, you see here most recently we've added this campus, IU Kokomo and IU East. And the goal from the beginning was if these coaches do their jobs and have the impact that we expect to see, we should see a significant year-over-year increase in retention. Although the data hasn't completely come in yet, we don't have the final retention numbers yet. What we do have is the registration rate. So the students who came back this year, and I should say that in order to continue their business with the state, this firm had to achieve a certain an agreed upon retention increase milestone in order to continue to receive the subsidy from the state. In the case of Indiana State, it was 3 points, a 3 percentage point increase over the historical average, and we see based upon the most recent data, they're at 4.2, so really positive. And for those in the room who live and breathe retention every day, they would tell us that even a 1 point increase in retention is a pretty big deal and can make a big impact in revenue as well as in student success. But more remarkable is Ivy Tech. We had an agreed upon 5 point increase for students at that campus, and based upon the most recent registration rates, we, with all due caveats, 11.2. So more than doubling what the goal was for a year-over-year retention rate increase. We'll know more in the next few weeks in terms of exactly how that shakes out, because again, those in the retention business will tell you there's a lot of fluidity with those numbers leading up to the start and even the fall in classes. But in terms of leaving you with what we hope is an encouraging sign of momentum, we're seeing that we can have a pretty significant impact on this population in a relatively short time frame if we focus our attention, we put the right supports and expectations in place, and we hope to be able to come to you this time a year from now with a similar case study with these other campuses that are on board here in Kokomo and IU East, and that perhaps our other campuses are looking at similar strategies that can have the same types of outcomes. And so with that, this is your public discourse.com header, so you're not rid of me yet. I will pause, answer any questions, and then we'll transition to our panel.
How much better do scholars who have historically had an average of 2.5 or over actually, how much better do they do than those who?
I don't know if I know the numbers right at the top of my head. Sarah, I don't know if you were listening or not, but do you happen to remember off the top of your head how much better students with a 2.5 GPA perform than those who don't have a 2.5 GPA?
No. What we know is, we can get those numbers for you for sure, that those between 2.0 and 2.5 were markedly less likely to be successful, and that the numbers show, but we can try to pin that down. We're spending a lot of time on this today for multiple reasons. One, at the very core of the mission of everything we've been talking about, Mission for Higher Education, for so many years. We went to the legislature requesting another $93 million this year to cover the cost for our scholars. And so everything that we have been doing, and that these folks are going to talk about, has really been focused on really getting more students to be successful. And I think all the numbers that we're showing you today are trending in the right direction in measurable ways. I mean, the last couple of years have been the first time we've actually been able to say that they're completing at a higher level than their low-income peers. And now they're not only completing, but more of them are completing on time. We saw the biggest bump in our completion reports for on-time completion for our scholars. And so I think bringing all these things together, this is a great example of how policy and the use of funding makes a difference in terms of making progress. Now, as Jason very clearly said, we want our scholars to be completing at as high a level as the population at large. And so this is not cause for celebration, but it's cause for encouragement and moving in this direction.
Right. And I should say that, as Teresa sort of indicated, that 2.5 wasn't chosen arbitrarily. There was sort of some compelling data that said 2.5 is going to be more impactful than 2.4. And of course, diminishing returns, the higher you go beyond the 2.5. So but we do have that data. As Teresa said, we can pull it. Just can't retain it. One last slide.
I can't resist making this comment that it would be interesting to see the statistic going from 2 to 2.5.
Yes, right.
Is that our colleges, let's assume 2.0, someone who had a 2.0 high school record, the chance of his or her success is very slim. And obviously, that the college is a disservice to the student to be admitted to the college, because the chances of that student succeeding are very, very low. And I don't know if we've ever actually suggested to colleges that they should be admitted.
Well, I think it's clear they have different, schools have different admissions requirements, and that's sort of been, it's up to the campuses to do that, but what everybody knows is the academic preparation of the student lead going
It's
into
so
college
key.
is the big,
Right.
the more academically rigorous your curriculum is in high school, the more likely are you to be prepared for college level work.
Right.
This is where I start speculating, which is never a good idea, but when you think back to one of those earlier slides, in the last 5 or 6 years, we have seen a pretty significant shift in more of our scholars going to community college. And in part, I think we could argue that that's a response to raised admission requirements at our career colleges. It's also the fact that we have a much more visible, stronger community college system than we had 10 years ago. So, but nevertheless,
I would sure like to say for sure, so we don't have scholars going to our community college meeting remediation when they get there.
one last thing to leave you with before transition to the panel. For the first time this year, we're sort of taking our traditional student conference and sort of putting it on steroids. And we're calling it the Student Advocates Conference. So it's about students and helping students become their own advocates, and also giving a platform to those professionals in their schools, in our campuses, in our communities that work with students to give them a voice and support. And so for the first time, we're going to be doing sort of a full 2-day conference for the first time that will sort of give us a platform to talk about what these best practices are, give us an idea of what some of the lessons learned, what are the statewide initiatives that are in place to address this, and also acknowledge some of our really strong partners across the state, historically and today, who have supported 21st century scholars, but also students more generally, but couldn't resist doing this for the first time when the program's at the young age of 25. Maybe in 5 years we'll come back and give it a second more. But today we think it's in a good place, but it's really only as good as the local partnerships that are on the ground, really making it a true force. And that's why we thought it was perfectly appropriate to sort of give you a little bit of a snapshot into a related effort we've had going on for the past several years that in many ways has informed all the reforms that have come through. It gave us a bit more confidence to put some of these expectations in place, knowing that we had the counsel and expertise and track record and experience of our professionals in the schools and the communities who've done this work and can tell us what works, and we can back it up with data. And so with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Nelson, who has been our manager for this initiative. She's going to provide a little bit of a history, just so you have some context. We're going to give you more data from Dr. Molly Chamberlain, and then we'll quickly transition to a panel discussion, and we'll encourage our commission members to chime in as often as you'd like. Kelly?
Stay right here. Can I click for this?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring it. She's gonna switch it over. Do you need it to get properly?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us. I think I can say for all of us, we're really excited. Really excited. We've been doing this kind of work for almost 6 years, and given what Jason just presented, I feel, I guess, really fortunate that we kind of got to study a microcosm of all of that work. I'm nervous. You're a new group for me, so I'm going to try. Okay, so this is Indiana's College Success Mentoring Initiative. We have been together, like I said, 6 years, all of us, even Molly in between. And basically what we're going to do is give a little bit of history about what we did, and then Molly's going to talk about the results, and then we'll move into program history. In 2009, we applied for the College Access Challenge Grant, which you're probably aware of. And the biggest component of that was on-the-ground services. We were obviously looking at all of the information about scholars and decided that we needed to get a better look in the communities, in particular communities. So we started working with IYI to develop a partnership and figure out how best to go about getting into the communities, finding mentoring organizations to work with. And Tim and I have been two peas in a pod, riding around the state together for all that time as well, meeting with students in schools and post-secondary, everybody. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah. I'm kind of wearing two hats today. I'm representing the Indiana Youth Institute, and my role I have as the program manager or project manager, I say, of this initiative, but I'm also wearing the hat of being the commissioner, outreach coordinator in the Central region. So when we look at the history of this, I actually came to IYI to actually help develop and manage this Youth initiative. So when the commission approached IYI, obviously Indiana Mentoring Partnership was going to be a great partnership. It was looking at how can mentoring be a part of these 21st century scholars' lives and help them better succeed, being prepared for college and obviously being successful as well. So when we look at the actual components that we use, obviously we went into the fact that 21st century scholars was going to be our cohort. All right, we had a captured group, students who had made the decision in middle school that they wanted to go to college. Okay, and then we looked at mentoring programs. One of our biggest things that we looked at was that we wanted to look at mentoring programs that had already made that commitment and was knowledgeable about the 21st Century Scholars Program. And how can we help really enhance their mentoring process? So one of the things that we asked each one of these mentoring programs to do was that we wanted to make sure that we're providing year-round mentoring. Not just during the school year or part of the time. We want to make sure that it's totally year-round. The other piece was obviously looking at relationships, all right? Was there a strong relationship with the high school or high schools in your community? If not, we need to increase that. And obviously one of the biggest pieces of this was looking at the intensity of actually the mentoring process, all right? Everything from the training that their staff received and the mentors received to the actual programming they provided and the actual college visits that they had students going on as well. So these were all basic components that would be to help develop this initiative.
And I guess what is different about this initiative, or what we looked at, is, typically mentoring happens K-12, and we follow the students all the way through. So the community mentors stayed with the students into post-secondary. That's what makes us unique.
So the partners, when we first sat down as a group, and we called ourselves a team. We came together, represented from IYI, from the commission, and from obviously organizations, and we sent out RFPs to all mentoring programs across the state. Okay, who was interested in this, and who was already again making that commitment to 21st century scholars. This is the final group of mentoring programs that really helped complete this 5-year project with us. This program. 5 of these out of 7 or so actually were with us that entire time. Tammy, who's going to speak a little bit later, Project Leadership came on, I want to say, a year after we started this initiative. And as you can see, and some of you may know some of these programs, you may not, but this is really a mix of different types of programs, and we purposely did that. We wanted to make sure that we had groups that were nationally recognized. We wanted to make sure we had groups that were small in stature and small in number, what they're looking at. We wanted to make sure we had faith-based organizations. So if you look, again, across the range here, it really spanned across the state, from Gary to Evansville, Fort Wayne, obviously Indianapolis, and all different types of organizations.
And we also made sure that we had community-based partners and school-based partners, so that we could look at the difference of, having the mentoring organization in the school versus outside of the school, how more frequently students could have access.
And one of the things that maybe just good to keep in mind as we're going through this presentation is, from the beginning, this was about learning. So that mentoring is not new, college and career readiness is not new. How do we blend it together, and how do we sort of test this in as many different environments and communities as possible to find out what actually works and what could work across the state, with the goal being that we
figure out what works, we'd be positioned to replicate it and scale it across the state. So I don't know if that's helpful.
And obviously, this is just a list of the high school partners. One of the key pieces that we asked of each one of the Menschenberg to be part of this is that they needed to partner with a minimum of one local high school, and we wanted to make that high school relationship as strong as possible. And again, Tammy will be able to speak to this as well, about the relationship they developed with their local Marion high school. But again, range of sizes of schools, but all those schools, their staff, starting with the principal, and in some cases starting all the way to the top of their school district, they all made commitments to this.
And I think before Molly presents the data piece, what is important to know is that we selected the schools based on poverty and based on free and reduced lunch. So these schools are actually I don't want to say the lowest of the low, but we did do that intentionally, because part of the goal of CCG, of that grant, was to specifically work with those in the greatest poverty. So we not only work just with scholars, but scholars within the greatest poverty.
And they had to have 70% free reduced lunch, even with the block. I'm pretty certain they want me to ultimately go beyond that 70%.
But that's why it's exciting to talk about the data, because we did work with, this is a big challenge, great challenge.
When I look at this list, we obviously have a good representative of a lot of different schools. I'm not really seeing any rural schools. Do you think that that's going to present some different challenges, and how are we looking at that?
The Fort Wayne schools, I would say where we started there was one school that was, and it got broken up into multiple schools. So we do have that population represented. It just started differently than it ended.
Well, and I will also say, I think Marion, good afternoon. Sorry, I'm just excited to get on. So Marion is probably the smallest of the schools listed up there. It was a school we had the privilege of working with in this initiative. We have been able at Project Leadership to take the learnings from this initiative and actually work in several rural schools. So some of the information that I'll be sharing today and some of the components are also through programs.
But your question sort of reveals an unfortunate truth, which is we didn't want to work with new mentoring programs. We wanted to work with established mentoring programs. There aren't that many mentoring programs in rural areas, which is sort of the problem. And our hope is not to, as great as Tammy is, not to just sort of airlift and drop her into a community and say, go make mentoring happen. No, that's not that idea. It's better if it can sort of come up from the community. So we need to give them some tools and work with they can develop their own.
So now Molly's going to talk about what we learned through the process. Oh, no.
Which is video after this.
Okay. So first, I wanted to say thank you to Commissioner Lubbers and Stacy Townsley. I'm not sure where Stacy went, but thanks to Stacy and Teresa, a data sharing agreement that we were able to enter into with the commission. We were able to get really great data on the kids who participated in ICSM. So the data that you'll see is a combination of data that we were able to get from the commission, as well as data from the National Student Clearinghouse for our small percentage of kids that went to college at mostly Indiana private institutions, a few out-of-state institutions. We also, and again, thanks to the commission and the great data work that they do, we were able to do some comparisons from the college readiness reports, which I'll be talking about. So our oldest cohort graduated from high school in 2012. So as you can see, it's still pretty new. That they would have just finished their third year of college in 14-15. So when we look at our class of 2012, they actually were our highest performing when it comes to enrolling in post-secondary. About 80% of them enrolled in post-secondary right after high school. That's going to be your blue bar. And then about another 4.5% enrolled in, they waited a year, they took a year out, or they waited 2 years to enroll. Then when you look at the class of 2013, you see that percentage of enrollment right after high school actually goes down a bit. It goes down to 67%. So 67 from 80%, and then about another 4% that enrolled after waiting 1 year out of high school. With the class of 2014, I'm not going to be talking much about them today. They would be what we consider our preliminary data. 14-15 data is right now only available from the National Student Clearinghouse. And obviously, you can't make comparisons with the class of 2014 in terms of how many kids would have enrolled, 1 year out, 2 years out, because those years simply don't exist. Now, why has the enrollment right out of high school, so if you want to make some apples to apples comparisons looking at the blue bars, dropped? Why was it so high for the class of 2012 versus the class of 2013? I'll go back to what Jason said, this has been a learning experience. Quite frankly, we dug into the data. The data don't necessarily tell us why that was the case. I think Tammy will be able to talk a little bit more sort of from the human perspective of things, that, kids are different, Tracy and Tim as well. But it is a little interesting to us, our class of 2012 did have those kind of fairly high enrollment rates. If we go on to the next slide, we were actually able, again, using the commission's data, which looks at enrollment immediately after high school. So this is just taking your kids who enroll right after high school. Our class of 2012, kind of gangbusters. We compared them against the state average. They were quite a bit higher than the state average. We compared them against all 21st century scholars. They're higher. We compared them against graduates from the schools that the kids came from. That list of schools that you saw presented to you, they were, what I would say is considerably higher in enrollment. And then about the same as 21st century scholars at those high schools that they came from. So sitting right at about 80%. Now, when you make the same comparison for the class of 2013, no surprise, their enrollment rate was a bit lower. They still outperformed the state average, and they still outperformed graduates from the high schools that they came from, but their enrollment in post-secondary right after high school was actually lower than 21st century scholars statewide and lower than 21st century scholars in those high schools they came from. Again, I think when Tammy starts to dig into her stories a little bit, as well as Tim and Tracy, talking about it's hard to know why the class of 2012 sort of achieved these milestones, I guess, at rates that were, higher than the class of 2013. And, when we kind of have our discussion a little more, I'll get into this a little bit more. But then when you go on and just to sort of look at the profile of our kids, they really look a lot like 21st century scholars. 97%, I think that was exactly the percentage for scholars, Jason, enrolled in Indiana. So again, this is the class of 2012, class of 2013. The vast majority are enrolling in Indiana, 87% at an Indiana public, 9% at an Indiana private, and then 1% at a for-profit. 68% actually enrolled at a four-year institution, and 78% enrolled full-time. I think the full-time part is something that we're fairly excited about because, again, students enrolled full-time more likely to complete on time and be able to use that 21st century scholarship that they have. And then finally, I think that a little bit more excitement, especially, well, mostly for the class of 2012, comes in that our class of 2012, 84% actually went on to their second year of college. So for those kids that enrolled in college, 84% persisted to year two. Now comparatively, and again, thanks to great data from Stacy and the Commission, 69% of all students who enrolled in that same year persisted to year two, and 78% of scholars. So the ICSM students actually persisted at higher rates than all students and scholars. This is for the class of 2013. So we're really excited about that 84% year one to year two rate. But wait. When you look at the, and then jumping ahead to the class of 2014, again, that was our cohort that, sort of showed a little bit more challenge. They tended to enroll in college at lower rates, and their year one to year two persistence rate went down to 67%. So about 2/3 of them went from year one to year two. We don't have statewide comparison data available yet. So if you think that, let's assume, Jason, to use a Jason point, let's assume that the state rate for persistence for the class of 2014 is about the same as it was the year before. 67% is about the same as that 69%, but it's probably going to be lower than all scholars. Now here's the part that was more concerning for us. let's go back to our class of 2012. They were our really high performers. They were the ones that we were really excited about. They had an 80% enrollment rate in college right after high school. 84% of them continued on to the second year. Less than half of them have gone on to year 3. So from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, less than half have gone on. And as we have our discussion, I think that that's really something that we want to talk about in terms of what was the initial focus of ICSM, which was really about getting kids to college. It was about making sure they were prepared. It was about making sure they could walk onto campus. And I think in terms of lessons learned, we've learned it can't stop after that first year. It can't stop after that second year. So we wanted to provide some of the data here just to put our conversation in context for you. And so with that, Kelly, I think we can move on to the discussion unless there's specific questions about the data, but again, we'll be having some conversations about them.
Did you segregate that second to third year or even the second year by institution to see if some were doing a really good job of getting second to third year?
That's a great question, Teresa. Actually, we did not do that disaggregation. So the N size gets fairly low the more disaggregations that you do. Now, in terms of where the kids enroll, it's very similar to the scholars. It's Ivy Tech, it's ISU, it's IUPUI, and it's Ball State. That is actually something that we'll get you because I think that that's a great thing to look at. I'm going to guess it's probably going to be about the same. Now, something that is where we did disaggregate and see some differences is among mentoring providers. And I think that Tammy is going to show Tammy's organization actually had some higher persistence rates, and I think Tammy's organization is one that really does look at, working with kids or has been looking at, okay, what are we going to do as they go on? So there definitely was difference, there were differences among providers. There were differences among high schools that the kids came from. But certainly looking at college campuses, I think is good.
Well, it would be interesting to look at that because I know when we did site visits and would actually meet with the scholars on the campus and the different resources and people who worked with them, there were distinct differences on what was available. And not in relation to resources. There are plenty of resources, but in how individuals specifically helped those students navigate the resources. So it would be curious to compare sort of our anecdotal stuff with our site visits with how it actually worked.
That's something that we'll share with you, and then you can maybe share with the rest of the district.
Before we transition to the panel, to give you a lot of numbers, we wanted to briefly show you one of the faces behind them. We did a short video that's an interview between one of the mentees and Laura. I don't know if you guys can.
Yeah, I'll set this up real quick. We obviously, this has ended up being our poster child or poster scholar, you might say, David. David's from Indianapolis, and David, as he will say in the video, enrolled in the YMCA program, and that was part of our initiative. So this is something in which he tells his story about how he got involved in the mentoring program and with the areas.
Some people say college isn't for them.
Growing up from where I grew up from, in the west side of Indianapolis, it was a bad area, heavily gang populated, drugs and all that. Most of my youth, my friends in the neighborhood, were getting locked up in jail.
It's not easy out here finding jobs. I was quite worried. David didn't care about school. It was just like whatever I could do to get by is what his mentality was.
The biggest need that I see is support.
Me looking for a mentor, it was like, I need somebody to keep me in check. I need somebody to look over me.
Having that other person in their life that, may not be a parent or a teacher that can, help give them that little push.
But Courtney came in and he gave me more than that. He gave me almost somewhat like a father figure. That's what he gave me, because my father was never around.
He knows what he wants out of life. He's got a strong mother that really pushes him to do well.
I want them to do better than I did. I don't want to have to struggle, be my age, still trying to get a degree.
And my school, they had flyers out from the YMCA this, YMCA that. And I saw college readiness, and I looked at it, and I was like, I need that. I knew my mama would say I need that. So I picked it up, and I actually went to the meeting. And then there I met Courtney Crawley.
David reminded me a lot of myself. I've never met a stranger. He has the same attitude.
David stayed in trouble a lot when he was younger.
I was a troublemaker. My grades weren't the best, and basically I needed help at the right moment.
try to make sure that he's prepared.
Courtney was my human calendar.
Let him know dates that are coming up as far as SATs, ACTs.
He had my tasks organized like FAFSA.
A good time to start applying for schools.
Make sure you apply early.
Making sure he stays on top of his books and finishes his senior year strong.
Graduating from high school was like, wow, this is surreal.
Then to see, all 6'9" of them walk across that stage, it felt really good.
In my family, I'm the first male to do anything since my uncle, which is back in the 60s. He's old.
The thing that sticks out the most to me was the day that he received his acceptance letter at Ball State.
It was a Saturday.
I remember I was out with my family, and he called me about
8, 9 o'clock. Came home, got some groceries out the trunk. I looked in the mailbox, I was like, that has to be from Ball State. It had a real big envelope. I was like, please let this be from Ball State. So I got inside, I opened it, and then before I could even read the rest of the letter, it said, congratulations, you have been formally accepted into Ball State University.
He fell to the floor. He started crying.
I've been waiting for this for like 2 long years. And when they finally came in that February night, I was like, man. I had to call Courtney. I couldn't even get to my phone quick enough. I had to use my mama's phone. I was like, Mama, give me your phone real quick, give me your phone. So I called him up. I was like, man, I did it, man. I made it.
8:39, I heard his brother in the background, and he was telling me, man, I just got my acceptance letter. Thank you. I knew his mother was very, very proud. I heard her in the background.
And I started crying because then I knew he had gotten accepted to the school he wanted to go to.
It was a joyful night. It was tears of joy just pouring down my face. My mama, I seen the expression on my mama's face. She was like, I'm so proud of you.
When he told me I was the first person he called, that made me feel like, wow, this kid really he's excited. To be the first person he called after that let me know, exactly how he really felt about me.
I mean, Courtney's great, man. I mean, the day of my graduation, he was there. The day my acceptance letter came in for Ball State, he was there. College, he's here. I mean, man's not going nowhere no time soon.
I'm not one of his parents or anything like that, but, I feel like the relationship we've built, I will always, keep that. But I never thought that I would develop that relationship to where he feels like part of my family.
I mean, this man has kids of his own. He still treats me like one of his own. That's wonderful, man. Because I never thought I would be in that situation. Single mother, little sister. That's it. It's us 3 in the house. I accept Courtney into my family. That's how deep it is with us.
I would suggest strongly that if someone is willing to help your child, to allow them to do that. I really am grateful that he has taken the time out of his schedule and out of his life to make a difference in my child's life.
It's making me speechless almost, but I mean, it's Courtney. That's all I can say. That's him.
The David I met last June, July is totally different from the David I know now.
I'm staying on top of my grades, staying at the library, just trying to keep myself positive in a great environment.
So for the record, David is a senior at Ball State. So he is one of those kids who didn't remain anonymous, had a parent support, a mentor support, he had support at the institution, and he persisted. So it's so many things all together.
So, I have questions, but do any commission members have any questions to start?
I was just going to say, I met him in the media.
Yeah, he's on the radio.
Yeah, I just saw him on a high school football game one time and asked him what he was doing. He had a couple guys who were filming for Ball State. I didn't know which department.
Well, you can't miss him. He's 6'9".
He is different. As soon as I saw him, I got anyway, great story. Awesome.
We don't want to drive the whole conversation on anecdotes, but I think they tell a lot more than we can always see in the data. And Tammy Pearson, Judd knows her very well, #1 fan, is really one of the people that's making this happen on the ground. So can you describe a little bit about your experience with project leadership through this initiative, sort of some of the lessons you've learned, some of the things that you walked away with,
of how that's changing sort of your approach, because, you know, David's story and the data of what it didn't work out, I mean, this is what you guys do every day, and really nobody speaks about it, so I like you do.
Thank you
Or
so
not.
Thank you so much for the gift of your time. It means a lot. And I want to, you know, today I'm going to talk a little bit about our college access and success model. But I say with all sincerity that this model would not be what it is without the commission. It absolutely would not be. We would not have the depth, the learnings. It has been a phenomenal experience with the ICSM initiative. We're very grateful for that. And the folks who benefit, of course, are our students and our families. And it's a wonderful thing to go to the office every day and to be able to see that at work. While I'm sharing a number of comments today through the lens of the ICSM initiative, which occurred at Marion High School, I also want to acknowledge that this work is happening also outside of the Marion Grant County area and in Delaware County. And it's happening because we've had watchful eyes on us for a number of years, and those eyes have been Mr. Fisher's. And the Ball Brothers Foundation has actually made it possible that the work I'm sharing with you and the program materials and components and data and all the stories are happening across 2 counties. So, all right, so I'm going to cover some components, some data, and some lessons. So, project leadership, our model for college access and success really began in the year 2007. And we started with 21st Century Scholar enrollment. We were really fired up about improving that and working on the college access portion. And we did so prior to joining the ICSM initiative. We've been able to grow enrollment quite a bit, from basically 1 out of 10 to about 8 out of 10. And that's been tier 1 of our program at the middle school level, college access. What the ICSM initiative through the commission has done, however, is it has exploded 3 more tiers that I want to tell you about, components. Tier 2 is our high school mentoring. So Tim shared that each of the mentoring service providers, and that is project leadership's role in this, have different models. Our model has been one-on-one mentoring, 1 time a week. It happens at the high school and also in the community. So that's what our model has looked like, just so you have some framework there. We also, looking at tier 3, have realized that unless we help students with bridge programming, that the tier 1 part of the model, college access, means absolutely nothing. They're not making it there. They don't get there. And so we've been very passionate about making sure that we add some bridge services. And those begin in the senior year of high school for our mentees, for our 21st Century Scholars. All of our mentees, as we call them, are 21st Century Scholars. We'll make sure to point that out. So we have a fair number at the high school I'm speaking about today, approximately 750. 2 out of 3 of the students who are walking those halls at this very moment are 21st Century Scholars. Those are really high stakes and a responsibility that we take, well, very seriously, knowing that we need to help get them there. So as a part of the bridge, we actually the week after next, we'll be having a college application lab that happens at that school. And if history holds, as of the past 2 years, we'll be filing between 100 and 150 college applications in one day from that high school. I think that's really powerful. We have scholarship labs for the students because 21st Century Scholar, I think this is a myth that people have, that our parents, they think the 21st Century Scholars Program is going to cover everything. Well, of course, it doesn't cover everything. So it's important that students are looking for additional financial aid. And then we have FAFSA labs that happen in February. And those are really powerful. At Marion High School, we have been able to identify across a 12-hour period on a chilly day in February, more than $2 million in aid for our students there. So we just think that's great. So that's Tier 3, our bridge programming. And so as I shift us into Tier 4, I want to mention that in the summer between when students graduate from high school and when they go into post-secondary, we have summer bridge programming that we do in workshops for students that we think are really critically important. Portions of this bridge programming did not exist before the ICSM initiative. And the labs and the summer bridge workshops are having an enormous impact on our students and helping prepare them for what's next. The fourth tier, post-secondary, project leadership had a dream when it started the high school mentoring program. We understood that if we were going to work with students at the middle school level in college access and 21st century scholar enrollment and support them in high school mentoring, and then as we grew to provide those bridge services, that we knew we needed to be at post-secondary. It didn't make sense that just because a student turns 18 that they just drop off of our program altogether. And so because of the ICSM initiative and all of the wonderful people down this row, we have been able at Project Leadership a couple of years ago to begin a post-secondary mentoring program where students are followed into our higher ed world. And that has been life-changing. It is the absolute most critical addition to our services. So those are some of our components. And I know that there are lots of stories. I'll try to share just one or two things in here. But Dr. Molly, I also share. I know Dr. Molly. It sounds kind of like I enjoy data as well. It's critical to our programming. And so you asked a question about data, and I have little cards here. But so what happened to Project Leadership mentees at Marion High School who were 21st century scholars who were part of the ICSM initiative? What happened? Here's a headline that our scholars who were mentored at that high school matriculated at a higher rate than those who were not. So for those like Dr. Molly who enjoy that data, specifically, 72% of students served by Project Leadership enrolled in a post-secondary institution. The class of 2012 was really stellar. They had the highest enrollment of the 3 cohorts that we followed, of 81%. And speaking of the class of 2012, more Project Leadership mentees, more students, enrolled in post-secondary immediately after high school than 21st century scholars statewide, and significantly more than the state average in Marion High School grads. So we know that we're on the right track there. Just a second piece of data is that most of our Marion scholars continued after the first year in college. So this is great news. 79% continued from their first year post-secondary enrollment into their second. This is what isn't so great. 54% of Project Leadership students continued, only 54% continued from their first year to their third year. So we are really seeing a trend here where students not only have an issue in the summer before they're entering post-secondary, the students who we are serving, but also as they get older and they're on the campuses. And frankly, I think that sometimes within our program and those who serve the students, we might begin to relax a little bit. Well, they've made it through a couple of years. They've got the hang of this, and we're learning that our students do not. That the same socioeconomic barriers that existed when they entered that campus have not magically disappeared or gone away. And so these are some headlines that we certainly keep front of mind. And thinking about lessons learned, their relationships. This whole table could spend an hour talking about relationships. If there's one thing that has really made this successful, it has been that we have respected the role that relationships play, and we have worked to engage so many community partners. Our schools in particular have been so critical. When a community mentor arrives at Marion High School to mentor, there is a sign-in sheet. that they keep there along with the visitor log. That's just a little example. So it's not just that there's the visitor log and we're all signing in at the security checkpoint. There's also a 21st Century Scholar. You're going to, it doesn't say 21st Century Scholar, but you're here to mentor today. And I think that is a great example of the power of that relationship. Certainly the work that we're doing within the labs, I mentioned that these are conducted at the school. It's happening during the school day. And the school has recognized that financial aid literacy is a really critical component for students, particularly when you're in the senior year and you're hyperventilating about where you're going to get this funding and what the next steps are. So being able to have FAFSA labs that actually run 12 hours during the school day has been very successful as well. Additional lessons learned as we move through the ICSM initiative, we've discovered that our mentoring program will benefit from having stronger curriculum. And I may get a chance in a little bit to talk about that. But so we have a lot of discussions internally about what happens within the mentoring relationship and the structure of that. We've learned that we need to adapt what we know and what we're doing that works really well and just keep on doing it over and over and over. I was thrilled to see the SSP, the Scholar Success Program grid, up on the screen. That's powerful. From boots on the ground perspective, that is so powerful. Our students don't understand how to get from point A to point B. And so having a roadmap to be able to make that happen is going to be so critical in our modest opinion down the road as we're able to study that and analyze it. We have taken the models from our lab work. I mentioned we do college application and FAFSA labs, and we have begun what we call the SSP lab. Maybe we need a different name, I don't know. But, so we've begun Scholar Success Program labs because we realize that students, that we need to be intrusive, just a little bit. So we're helping them actually get enrolled, and we're actually talking with them about what their next steps are on the 12-step grid there. And so they're beginning movement with that. So that's been terrific. Data, I share sincerely with you that before this initiative, we operated a little bit in the dark, I think. And because of the data that we have been provided with from the commission, Ms. Molly, and just some other data, of course, that we collect, we are able to identify, I call them headlines, but ahas, or just some milestone pieces of data that really are driving our programming and what our next steps need to be. One of those has been through the post-secondary mentoring database. And I am most grateful for that database and the work that has gone into it, because we are able to not only accurately measure what's happening with students, but we are able to actually intervene. And that is the most important aspect, in my view, of the post-secondary mentoring database, that we don't have to wait until the end of May to say, here's what happened with our 21st Century Scholars. Because of the work through the ICSM initiative, we're actually able to say in October, November, December, we're able to look at that at any given point and say, what can we do now to impact that report that we pulled in May? So those are some of the components, data, and lessons learned.
Thank you. I know we don't have much time left, so we're just going to have maybe a couple more questions and we'll call it a day. I think either Kelly, you could all take this question, but either Kelly or Tracy, we talk a lot about the relationship between the mentor and the mentee, but this initiative sort of designed to really promote a more productive relationship between the management organization and the educators. Could you reflect a little bit on sort of what do those two sides not often understand about each other in terms of their roles, and also maybe what they can learn from one another, sort of how that relationship can and should work? or places that.
What do you mean by educator?
Either the school or the post-secondary level.
I think that your initial presentation, what we looked at here, it all kind of says a very similar thing, right? That we are good at getting them to college, we're good at getting them to start on the right foot, we are good at getting them partially through. I would say that in learning all that we've learned, the breakdown tends to happen around the second year of college, right? So the relationship with the high school is one thing, but if you think about the structure of the K-12 day, and that everything is announced and you're told what to do, and you know there's someone guiding the entire path. What happens is we can try with mentoring and instilling these sort of values and what you need to do and bridging, but once they reach the campus, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, they're having a hard time navigating. It's like it's so overwhelming because there's always been someone sort of helping navigate or point out where resources exist. And so I would say that the critical relationship is how our scholars are, how they are on campus and what resources.
That doesn't explain the difference between the first, you have good persistence from first to second, which is when you would logically think that. I mean, I think it really drives, and we don't have time for the discussion today, but I hope, and I know you guys are having this discussion about how are we using mentoring organizations to get students to self-advocate and to actually, so that you do see that, I mean, there's going to come a point in which they are going to be leading their own families, having their own jobs. And so something needs to be happening in this whole arena that teaches students to begin to be self-advocates as well. Because the numbers to me that are, and I know I've seen this before, but it's shocking to me that we have that high number that persists past the first year and then we lose them after that. And that's shocking to me. And so I think, I guess our challenge for all of us, and we obviously aren't going to solve it today, is to get under those numbers and to figure out, what is it that we need to do differently.
Yeah, I'll add to that as well. We've had a lot of conversations about what does it mean for a student to truly be ready, not just to be able to get into school, but to be able to persist through school. And we've thought about it along 3 dimensions, at least. One is social preparedness, academic, which we've had a lot of conversation about, and then financial literacy, not just doing the FAFSA, but understanding what that means. But on the social piece for a minute, because that's where the self-advocacy comes in, we've really honed in on the concept of grit and resilience and how to train. And so we've done trainings with mentoring organizations around the state the last couple of years on that, supported by the ICSM grant. And we've done work with both mentoring organizations in this cohort, but also lots of other community partners, thankfully, come to these trainings as well. And we work with them, and we have really great discussions and give them some tools and tips and things like that. And how do you leverage that relationship, the one-on-one relationship that you're building with kids, whether you're a formal mentoring program or maybe an after-school program or even summer camp? How do you take the time that you have with those young people to help them become better advocates for what they're interested in, what their future goals are? And it's been really, it's just, kind of an ongoing conversation, but there's so much research, particularly related to grit and the self-advocacy that comes with that can be a greater predictor of college access and completion than things that you would traditionally look at, like SAT and IQs and things like that, or GPA as well. So thank you for pointing that out, because that's become an ongoing conversation in Fred. And as we look at the legacy of ICSM, both out within IYI but around the state, that is one piece that we continue to beat that drum of self-advocacy in all of the trainings that we've been doing.
And one of the things that came out of all of this as well is that whole term someone else. We ran straight into where the students were telling us all year, I'm going to college, this is where I'm going, and all of a sudden in the fall we go looking for them on that campus, they're not there. So that's where we went to USA Funds and received the grant as well to do this past spring into the summer, where we actually met with students, we met with parents, and we made sure, you said you're going, you're senior, you just graduated, now let's make sure you know everything you're about to encounter. Let's make sure you do have all the resources and understand what you're about to deal with. And it was really telling, there were parents and students that said, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't realize I had to pay for that too. They had just graduated from high school. So there's so much more work to do.
Oh yeah, I wasn't implying I had an answer, or that there wasn't one place. But what I would like to look at is how the Scholar Corps campuses, how that is working. Because I've noticed that when I always say hand off the student, and that's not what I mean, but, go from the high school to the bridge to the Scholar Corps member, it would be, I think, critical to look at that and see how those students persist, because they may not have one-on-one mentoring, but they do have a person who they know is specialized to help them resolve issues or whatever may come up.
And I'll jump in and throw something about Yay Data, because data is so good. And just to Tammy's point, being able to actually, I think knowing where the kids are, the stories and everything are so powerful. The data can actually be an eye-opener. We did some data analysis not only for our ICSM organizations, but through another Indianapolis-based organization, looking at their enrollment. And a couple of the providers, we share the data back, especially for this class of 2013. I don't know what was going on with those guys, but we share the data back, and some of them actually called us and said, no, I know this is wrong, because I've spoken to 5 or 6 of these kids, and I know they're on a college campus. And we came back to them and said, there's no such thing as a perfect data system, of course, but are you sure? Because all of the research on summer melt actually says kids don't want to lie to their mentors. Or they do want to lie to their mentors. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but they don't want to let down their mentors. They want their mentors to think, yes, I'm at college, yes, I absolutely, in fact, I went to class today. But, we kind of came back to some of the providers and said, you may just want to deepen the conversation a little bit, because yes, it could be an anomaly in the data, but when it's saying that 52% of your kids have enrolled in class and you're saying that it's 96, there's probably something else going on here. And that's where the summer melt thing is just so fascinating, because the kids love their mentors so much that they just don't want to let them down. And so kind of the coupling of the stories, the personal relationships, and the data, I think is just where you can learn the most lessons.
So we really started to talk for this initiative, and I think the other one that you referenced too, and seeing how much of a drop off there is between sophomore, the second and third year, we started to see it as the second season of summer melt. They're the second summer melt that might be happening among our students in Indiana, the ones that were in this cohort anyway. And we, as we have the conversation, we think it's partly a function of some of the scaffolding of the supports are drop off, because there's not typically as much support, whether it's in the community or on campuses or wherever their support system is. There tends to be more in the first couple of years, and we think that they're older now, and we're going to start to kind of have that melt away. So, to the extent we can, how do we keep that scaffolding of support going longer than what we traditionally would do? And then also, as the scaffolding does come down, because they are grown-ups and they do have to advocate for themselves, we're really seeing that as things, things snowball. Whatever was hard about first year is even harder about second year. All of the issues that they've kind of pushed through for at least one semester, then 2 semesters, they all build and build and build. And so if they weren't truly ready and they couldn't advocate for themselves, then it all really hits the fan, in the second year. Because that happens, everything is harder at the same time, so the supports may be disappearing.
To be considered, since it sounds like the majority do tend to make it through those first couple of years, really encouraging them to work towards an associate's degree. And so they would at least come out after that 2 years with a meaningful degree, and then they could go on, if they so were choosing to do so, to finish their bachelor's. I mean, end up with something after 2 years. Maybe it's just fatigue. They've gone to school and it's been difficult, but 2 years apparently they can do. But 4 years sounds like it's maybe more than most, or half, are interested in.
You're hitting the point that we realized as well early on into this. It really came down to a 4-year college is not for everybody. And even going to a 2-year college is not for everybody. Maybe it's going to just get into an accreditation, becoming a welder, becoming a plumber. Lord knows, I pay for my plumber in front of my house right now. I wish I had done it myself. But it really comes down to, we work with all the mentor programs, that how can we help each student find their own path? The biggest thing we kept pushing everybody is that you have to go past getting a high school diploma. No matter what you do, go past getting a high school diploma. You're going to put yourself in a lot better in a situation to be able to really have a family, to be successful in life. So yes, and I think we saw the increase over the course of our 5 years. more and more of our population of ICSM students were going to schools because that was the better path, because mentors, staff people were intervening and said, hey, maybe IU is not for you right now. Let's go to Ivy Tech and do that. So we actually did see that increase over the couple years.
Everyone, thank you so very much. You've been a wonderful panel. Jason, thank you for working together and moderating. And we look forward to hearing more about you all's work as you continue to play your respective roles in helping us build this college and education culture. Not just one, but obviously needing to be ready so that we finish. Thank you very much. Thank you. You're very welcome. Now we have academic degree program on our agenda for full discussion. We have the PhD in biology and PhD in chemistry and chemical biology to be offered by IUPUI. And I would like to invite Ms. Candace Bibbert, Associate Provost for Special Initiatives at Purdue University, to present these items.
Thank you very much. I have with me here today Dr. Simon Rhodes, who is the Dean of the IUPUI School of Science, and Dr. David Skalman, who is the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Education in the IUPUI School of Science. And they'll be happy to answer any questions you might have as to just the degrees presented. I am pleased today to present for your consideration 2 proposals brought forward by Purdue West Lafayette for site-specific approval to award a doctoral degree at IUPUI. One in chemistry and chemical biology, and one in biology. These 2 proposals represent a long-standing partnership between the Purdue West Lafayette departments and the IUPUI departments. The partnership was designed as a strategy to expand the doctoral opportunities in the state, and especially in the Indianapolis region with high-quality doctoral studies. Because Purdue West Lafayette had well-established programs in these areas, the West Lafayette programs became a model for the 2 IUPUI programs. Admission standards are the same. Examinations such as qualifying exams and preliminary exams are the same. And Purdue West Lafayette faculty serve as advisors to students on their plan of study. Initially, IUPUI students took some of their coursework at Purdue West Lafayette. Fast forward to today. Chemistry and chemical biology and biology at IUPUI all offer all of the required courses for their doctoral students. They have robust programs with well-established admissions and examination practices. These practices remain linked with Purdue West Lafayette, but have reached the point where these linkages are no longer needed, and in many cases are cumbersome for both faculty and students at both campuses. Moreover, both of the IUPUI programs have relationships with local industry as sources of recruitment for students and placements of students who receive their doctoral degrees. As these programs have matured, their areas of research expertise have developed in ways that complement but do not duplicate Purdue West Lafayette. It is no longer appropriate for students to always have a faculty member from Purdue West Lafayette on their committee. Both corresponding departments at Purdue West Lafayette support these proposals for site-specific doctoral programs. The faculty in these departments at both campuses will continue to work together. Faculty will continue to serve on committees as appropriate. IUPUI faculty serve on Purdue West Lafayette committees as well. We appreciate your consideration for approval of these proposals to allow the IUPUI departments of chemistry and chemical biology and biology to award site-specific Purdue University doctoral degrees in chemistry and chemical biology and biology respectively. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions?
So would you like for them to come up now?
Are there any questions? Commission members? No questions? We're ready for the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. As you heard from Dr. Bibbert, these programs were envisioned right from the beginning to provide important graduate opportunities at IUPUI, and they in effect have been in place for 2 or 3 decades, depending upon which ones you're talking about. In fact, they have graduated, in the case of biology, between 1 and 2 students each year. And in the case of chemistry and chemical biology, an average of 2 students per year have completed that PhD program. These programs clearly, although they're not large programs by the standards of those that are available at the Bloomington and the West Lafayette campuses, they certainly are important programs and well complement the professional doctoral programs that are available at IUPUI, medicine, dentistry, nursing, etc. So this, in effect, really would recognize what has been going on for some time. It has a very practical effect of aligning the data. In the past, the enrollment data were reported for IUPUI, but there were no degrees reported for IUPUI in these areas. They were reported under the West Lafayette campus. So this will now better align that data and really give recognition to the research activities of the IUPUI campus in these areas. I do want to underscore that in the course of these conversations, Purdue University has indicated that it believes there are 4 other situations similar to these 2, and that the university would like to bring additional PhD programs for approval for the IUPUI campus. I've not seen any documentation of those other 4 programs, so at least from a staff perspective, we would ask you to any approval here would not obligate the commission or have any necessary impact on what you might do in the other 4 areas. Just don't know what those look like. For these 2 programs that are so central and that are so critical to providing some foundational support for the professional doctoral programs in medicine, dentistry, etc. These really make sense, and they are, again, while not huge programs, they're certainly very respectable programs in terms of their size, and in our view, at least, it would be appropriate for the commission to take action on these programs. One other note with respect to these other 4 programs that are that we will likely see in the next 4 to 6 months. Recall that as a result of the engineering discussions of the IU program at Bloomington, Purdue and IU agreed to form 3 work groups that would look at various ways in which the universities can better collaborate. One of those focused on IUPUI. I think it would be appropriate to see what activities and conclusions, perhaps if any conclusions have been reached by that work group, and to see what those discussions are yielding and how they might impact some additional doctoral programs at IUPUI. In any case, that's for the future. Today we have the 2 PhD programs, so I will then give the staff recommendation, which is that the commission approve the PhD in biology and the PhD in chemistry and chemical biology to be offered by Purdue University at IUPUI. I'm pleased to respond to any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That desirous question from Mr. Beck.
I don't have a question. I just think it would be appropriate in addition to recognizing Candace Goodrick's work on this and the excellent support she's given and all the people of us out there getting to this development. should also introduce Simon Rhodes, who's the dean of the school, Purdue School of Science at IUPUI. He's the person who really led all of the great activity in recent years at that school, and it should be a point of pride for Purdue and IU and all of us. It's been excellent work. Simon, do you have anything you'd like to contribute?
No, thank you. We're very proud. These degrees very much, and the four that are coming, very much fit in with how we are very much succeeding in our environment. We are going to graduate this year, last year and this year, a record number of undergraduates and graduate students. 90% of our students are from Indiana, 90% of our students stay in Indiana. This year we will have record federal funding, and approval of these degrees well complements the philosophy we have in IUPUI Science, in that our undergraduates really benefit from that rich research environment. All of our undergraduates have significant research experience. So if these are approved, this not only helps our doctoral students, but this really helps our undergraduates and our whole educational mission. So thank you for your consideration.
There are no more questions or comments. Is there a motion for approval? Motion and second. All those in favor of approving the program indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? It is approved. I was about to say, if we would have a whole lot of gall to appoint him to Sagamore to Wabash and then reject his recommendation. So much for sage advice. So unanimously approved. We have two capital projects for expedited action. They're on page 67, University of Southern Indiana Welcome Center for the University of West Lafayette Country Hall, University Residences. I have a motion for approval. Second. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? They're approved. And then as a follow-up to our discussion this morning on the early intervention policy presented by Josh and other staff, the commission now has the opportunity to approve the recommendations which are on page 71. There's a motion for approval. Second. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? They are approved. And you have information items. Any old business? New business. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't take a second and just acknowledge Sarah's mother who has joined us today. Ma'am, thank you very much for visiting us from Peru. You're very welcome. It's a pleasure having you here today. And I am to see if your daughter is, but you know this already, she is something special. Very bright lady with a bright future. Thank you for joining us. So our next meeting will be in South Bend on October the 8th. If there's no other business, the meeting is adjourned.